Alright guys, let's start with a topic that's not often discussed, which is individual selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors and individual serotonin and norepinephrine reuptake inhibitors. Usually UG and PG we study them as a class. We don't individually go into the pharmacokinetics, the pharmacodynamics and the differences between each of these agents. In this presentation today, we'll be doing exactly that. The topic on side effects, we are going to not cover a lot, just some very specific side effects of these SSRIs and SNRIs. But primarily, the individual differences between each drug is very, very important. And it's often very important in certain exams like the Royal College exams, all right? So, I'm a pictorial person. I think if you look at pictures, you can get a whole idea of what's going on rather than if we just by heart. It makes learning so much easier. So this is one picture that in short can tell you a lot about the serotonergic system, right? So right at the beginning, when tryptophan, which is the primary building block of serotonin, when that's taken in by the cell body, it is converted to 5-hydroxytryptophan, okay, by this rate limiting enzyme called tryptophan hydroxylase. And this 5-hydroxytryptophan is converted to 5-hydroxytryptamine, a monoamine like serotonin. So 5-hydroxytryptamine is serotonin, and this is converted by this enzyme, which is not the rate limiting enzyme by the way. It's amino acid decarboxylase, all right. Now serotonin is formed, but then it's put and stored in this vesicles, okay. And when the action potential goes through, when the stimulation goes through, it releases, it fuses with the end terminals of the axon and it releases the serotonin in the synaptic cleft. It's very important to know, when we first started, I think, psychiatry, we were primarily thinking of serotonin just at this cleft. But we also need to know that not just here, the serotonin comes back near the cell body and it also gets concentrated here. This is very, very important, as I'm going to tell you why. After it is released, it is then taken up by the serotonin reuptake, serotonin transporter, and then it fuses back with the vesicles, or it's destroyed by the MAO enzyme, and after the destruction by the MAO enzyme, you get this metabolite. So either it can be taken up by the storage vesicle here, or it can be acted upon or degraded by the MAO enzyme. So what does SSRIs do? What do SSRIs do? They block this reuptake. Okay, that is what they do here. So more and more of the serotonin gets concentrated here. And this is an immediate action. So we should hypothetically be thinking of an immediate improvement in your mood, but that usually does not happen. What we usually get first, in the first 1 week or 2 weeks, are the side effects of serotonin. That is nausea, headache, sexual dysfunction. But the good effects, the beneficial effects, are delayed by 2 to 3 weeks. Why does this happen? It is because it is not just the serotonin here that is being blocked, but the reuptake here is also being blocked, which means there is too much serotonin here near the cell body. And the new hypothesis is it is this concentration of serotonin here that produces the real change. Now you'll notice there's this serotonin receptor 5-HT1A. It works as a feedback loop regulator. At normal levels of serotonin, once it's released, it diffuses here, and then there's a negative feedback loop, and 5-HT1 gives signals to stop releasing more serotonin. That's how it works. But when there is SERT inhibition, which is what the SSRIs and even most of the SNRIs do, there is an excess of serotonin, there is a flood of serotonin, and too much serotonin has the opposite effect. It desensitizes it. So the 5-HT1A is desensitized, which means it stopped working, which means effectively the brakes are gone and there is a rush of serotonin molecules. And so that is perhaps responsible for the beneficial effects that are noted after 2 to 3 weeks, right? Now, in this particular diagram, you'll also look at all the different kind of receptors here. You'll also notice that 5-HT3 is not a G-coupled receptor, but an ion channel receptor. So, a lot of other information you can also gauge from looking at this particular system. We'll not get into the nitty-gritties of all of them. So, the receptor subtypes, the receptor families, but please note that 5-HT1A is very crucial for the beneficial effect of the SSRIs. Going to the history of the SSRIs, as you can see, we have 7 molecules and all of them have different structures. So, they are structurally not related. So, the SSRIs are perhaps the first and the primary group of molecules that were not just chanced upon. So, chlorpromazine, by chance, you could see its antipsychotic effect. Lithium, by chance, you could see its antipsychotic effect. MAO inhibitors, TCAs, by chance. But with this SSRIs, there was a hypothesis that preceded its discovery, the monoamine hypothesis. And so the pharmaceutical companies went about looking for and developing specific serotonin reuptake inhibitors. And that is why they first came up with Prozac, which is fluoxetine. And so it was really developed in the most human sense possible and not just chanced upon. Now, before fluoxetine though, there was another SSRI called Zimeldin. This was not FDA approved, this was used in Sweden. But what they noticed was that it caused a huge increase in the number of, or at least some increase in the number of Guillain-Barré syndrome, a neurological syndrome. So it was withdrawn from the market before even getting FDA approval, which is why the first SSRI that got the FDA approval was fluoxetine. And this was done in 1987. Sequentially after that, we formulated Sertraline, then Paroxetine, then Fluvoxamine, citalopram, and the latest is escitalopram. And you should know some common characteristics of all these drugs, some differences, some common denominators by which you can gauge them. So, if not anything, you should know that fluoxetine and its metabolite norfluoxetine, which is also active, has the longest half-life. So, fluoxetine has the longest half-life. And you should know that paroxetine and fluvoxamine have the shortest half-life. So, if not anything else, you should know this at least. People often think that paroxetine has the shortest half-life, but that's not so. It's fluvoxamine that has the shortest half-life. Another thing that is very important is that you should know the substrates of, you should know the enzymes that act on each of these SSRIs and whether it inhibits or induces other enzymes. Fluvoxamine, fluoxetine and paroxetine, you must know that fluvoxamine inhibits CYP1A2 and so it affects clozapine, and we'll be talking about that when we talk of fluvoxamine. Fluoxetine inhibits CYP2D6 as does paroxetine, and they are very potent inhibitors. All these are potent. Alright. Going on to fluoxetine, and it was marketed as Prozac and it caused a huge revolution. Alright, so no more, there were no more agents that had all these undesirable side effects like anticholinergic side effects or antiadrenergic side effects. You had a very pure class of antidepressants that could target the SERT transporter and therefore you could get all the benefits but without any of the side effects. That was the initial level of thinking. So Prozac was a cultural revolution. It was even named one of the products of the century by Fortune magazine. Okay, there was a lot of controversy also because people felt that you were pill popping Prozac to the point that even normal human emotions were numbed down and you were constantly cheerful. And there was a term called cosmetic psychiatry, which I'll want you all to go up and read up about, in which people who were taking Prozac felt better than normal. They felt good. And so ethical discussions came about. Are we changing the human experience by making SSRIs so widely available? All right. But going to the chemical effects and the pharmacodynamics, we do know that along with its serotonin reuptake inhibition, it's also a 5-HT2C antagonist. And it has weak norepinephrine reuptake inhibition activity. This is a good thing because if you are a 5-HT2 antagonist, you increase levels of dopamine and norepinephrine, especially in the prefrontal cortex. So anhedonia, amotivation, all right. These are often addressed by 5-HT2C antagonism. You should also know that in the prefrontal cortex, you don't have dopamine reuptake inhibitors. You have only norepinephrine reuptake inhibitors. And these have a greater affinity for dopamine than for norepinephrine. All right. So there is a flood of dopamine that happens in the prefrontal cortex, and there is a lesser flood of norepinephrine that also happens in the prefrontal cortex. So it's a very activating drug. It's very good for especially people who have obstructive sleep apnea and who are very somnolent, who are very lethargic. That's a good thing. It's also a bad thing if it can increase your agitation, increase your restlessness, increase your anxiety initially at least. So you should need to mix and match the patient profile with the activating actions of fluoxetine. As I said, it inhibits CYP2D6, therefore it can increase levels of risperidone, diazepam, and as I said, it has a long half-life, and its metabolite norfluoxetine has an even longer half-life. This can be good because people with compliance issues, they can skip a day or two of fluoxetine and will not have any major problems. Even if you miss a day or two of the medications, you will not have any severe discontinuation syndromes. It can pose a problem when you want to stop fluoxetine and when you want to start another SSRI, because at least in theory, they shouldn't overlap. So for the washout period for fluoxetine and norfluoxetine would be higher compared to the other SSRIs. The dose is generally 20 to 60 milligrams per day, but in OCD, of course, higher doses are used, 80 to 120 milligrams. We then go to sertraline. It has weak dopamine transporter inhibition and sigma receptor binding. Sigma 1 receptor is used for anxiolysis. It helps with anxiety and antipsychotic. Now, this is also a property that is shared with fluvoxamine, but this is more stronger. Its DAT inhibition is also weak, so you can pair it up with a stronger transport inhibitor like bupropion. The maximum absorption is postprandial. So you would ask your patients to take it after a meal, but it also is the SSRI with the maximum GI symptoms. It can cause a lot of diarrhea. So you need to be careful about patients who already have GI symptoms. It is again a very activating type of molecule, and the dose is 50 to 200 with respect to depression, but in OCD you can go up till 300 and even 400 as well. Going on to paroxetine, it has prominent anticholinergic and NAT inhibitory actions, which are weaker compared to the cholinergic properties. It is more calming, it is more sedating, but the discontinuation symptoms are also quite prominent. This is because not only is its half-life on the shorter side, but because there is something called cholinergic withdrawal. When you stop, there's a cholinergic rebound, which means when you suddenly stop paroxetine, the anticholinergic brake is taken off and there is a cholinergic rebound that makes it very anxiety provoking for the patient. It also doesn't have any metabolites. So once it's out of the system, it does not have any active metabolites to kind of mitigate the discontinuation features. It's usually used at a dose of 20 to 60. It's a prominent inhibitor of CYP2D6, as we said, and it also inhibits the enzyme nitric oxide synthase, and therefore theoretically it could contribute a lot more to sexual dysfunction compared to the other SSRIs. Going on to fluvoxamine, this is a very, very important molecule. It has prominent sigma 1 binding properties, and there is a term called sigma enigma, which means that not only, as I said, is it used for anxiolysis and antipsychotic effects, but there are a lot of other properties which we have not as yet discovered, including replication of the COVID virus, which is why, as I will talk about later, it was often used initially to decrease the severity of COVID symptoms. All right. The dose is 100 to 300 milligrams per day. It has the shortest half-life. You do have an immediate release preparation and you have the controlled release preparations, and it has no active metabolites.